past 10, even maybe 20 years, it was the anti-hero that was the hero. And I thought that said something about society, that we don't know how to tell stories about good men anymore. But I do see that changing.
Welcome back to Conversations. I'm Emma.
And I'm Ginny. Today we venture into the universe of graphic novels.
We are interviewing Vinny, who is working on his dream project, a very cool project.
That's right. So let's hear his story, his inspiration, and how you can try to make time in your own life for your passion project.
Let's meet the artist. Vinny, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on. This is really exciting.
So, Vinny, I first met you and your family because your family and our family are part of the same church plant here in Charlotte. And I immediately thought, wow, they're a really cool family. And I didn't even know you're an artist then. I love artists.
I'm not very cool, but it was great. It was great meeting everybody, and we're having a great time. But yeah, I do write and I draw. I'm more of a writer than an artist. I'm still working on the art side of it, but.
Well, I think you're a fantastic artist from what I've seen. But tell us, you founded a graphic novel company, is that right? And what's behind that?
Yes, it's called Oblation Comics. Oblation is a word that means worship, and it's not I wouldn't call it a Christian comic book company. I am a Christian, but in the same way that, if you read Lord of the Rings, it's not really a Christian book, even though Tolkien is a devout Christian. So the story behind that is I grew up loving comics. That's what, as a child, really captured my imagination. And obviously, you grow older, you become more exposed to novels and other material reading. But when I was a kid, that really captured my imagination, and something that I always wanted to. I loved art. I loved writing. I wrote all the time, as a kid, as an adult as well, and it's something that just was in my heart. And then it kind of, life got in the way. Life got complicated very quickly, as it does to most people. And I kind of just put that to the side and kind of buried it, didn't really think about it, and cold turkeyed everything, And I would work, just to try to make a living, provide for the family and all that. But it wasn't until my daughter, who also shares my passion for art and writing, she stumbled upon my old high school sketchbooks. And she was flipping through it. This is probably about 2 years ago. And I was telling her about all the stories that I wrote in high school and all this kind of stuff. And she was getting really into it. She's really excited. And that kind of reminded me, kind of stirred up like, oh yeah, that's what I always loved doing. I kind of forgot about that part of me. So she helped reignite that. And it was at that point a few years ago where I'm like, I want to do this. Like, I'm just going to get this done. There's stories that need to be told, and I'm not going to put it on the back burner anymore. And so Oblation Comics were kind of born at that moment, where it was a form of worship in my heart. Not that, again, these are all Christian stories or anything like that, but for me, this is my company. This is an act of worship, so that I'm using what God's given me and bringing it out there to hopefully turn more eyes to Him.
Jenny was telling me a little bit about what you do in graphic novels. What got you into that specifically to tell your stories? And she also said you partner with a friend. How did you just kind of collaborate? And I've seen your website; it's super cool. You're gonna be like, I've been called cool 10 times today.
I gotta call my friends at the chess club.
But it is, and so I guess the question again is, what kind of made you choose that to tell your stories, and how did you make it happen?
That's a great question. So you can probably see behind me, I have a wide variety of reading materials, novels, biographies, classics, epic literature. Graphic novels always stuck with me because, again, like I said, it really captures the imagination. To me, it's the perfect blend of visual and reading. You put pictures and words together, and it just creates a whole new medium. And it's my favorite medium of telling a story. Not that every story can be told through that medium, but that's just my personal favorite. And it's what I was familiar with, because I've read so many as a kid. I knew the craft, and I know how to tell stories through pictures and panels. And it's really fun, too, if you get into the nitty-gritty of it. Not that I don't want to bore the audience with the details of creating a comic book, but there's a thousand decisions that you have to make before you even put your pencil on the page. It's about having the reader follow clearly where you're leading them. It's about the size of the panels. It's a big action, big panel, small. If it's quick action, small panels sequentially, boom, 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 boom. And so there's just so much craft to it. There's so much creativity that goes into just even making the panels. It's not just squares. There's art to it as well. Like some might loop when it's done well. And so that's always been attractive to me. I love art, and novels are great too. I have a bunch of them that I really enjoy. But graphic novels, in my opinion, is just the best form of storytelling because you can do so much with it, and it is very challenging. A lot of people think that they can write until they actually try to write, and it's very
Yep.
very hard. And so I like the challenge, and I'm always trying to get better. But graphic novels are, I just have something, heart in it.
Well, I've noticed that the superhero stories that we watch in, the cinema today, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic Four or Spider-Man or Superman, a lot of them had their origins, right, in what we called comics then,
Mm-hmm.
which I guess are graphic novels. So it seems to lend itself towards that good versus evil superhero rescue motif. Is your story along those lines? Can you tell us a little about it?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Your
Thank
first
you.
novel?
Yeah, so I use graphic novel and comic book. To me, they're the same, just lengthwise, one's longer than the other. It just sounds more fancy if you say graphic novel. So,
Sounds cool.
yeah, another, yeah. Uh,
4 times.
I'll tally them, and then, but yeah. So, yes, you are correct. With more American comic books, you have the big two, Marvel and DC. You also have a lot of indies, which I'm one of them, that tell stories about good over evil, triumph, and all of that. You have more of complex stories as well. And now what's really popular is coming out of the East, more of like the Japanese comic books. That's really, I think, a transition in our culture of what's really capturing the imagination and the heart of young readers is coming out of the East. And they are more of a different style. They don't follow like the hero's journey as we do so strictly, where a call to action, climax, a big bad guy to fight at the end. Their style is more of a cyclical format where they have multiple characters. There's not necessarily even one real protagonist that goes through different perspectives, and usually the villain isn't evil; it's just tragic or misunderstood. And so that's really where I think society is moving towards. And I think that's interesting because, on a personal note, things get blurred in our society too, like good and evil. And the Bible obviously says, "Woe to those people who call good evil and evil good." And when things get blurred, there's a danger in that because, again, stories are like food for our souls. When we read them, it actually affects us whether we realize it or not. And when we're reading stories that are morally ambiguous, when we read stories that can affect our minds and our hearts and draw us away from truth, beauty, and goodness, that affects us negatively. It's like eating junk food all the time. And we see that more and more in culture. So, it's a long intro to my comic, Arbiter. That is more of a classic form of hero's journey storytelling. The basic premise is this main character, his name is Christian Murr. He has these abilities that he doesn't understand. He could see things that other people can't see. There's cracks in the sky. Our reality is kind of fracturing and breaking, and he sees it, and he doesn't know what to do about it. Why does he see the things that other people can't? Until he meets this man Joshua, who adopts him, and he sees the same thing Chris sees. And not only that, he's telling him what all this means. Like, hey, you're meant for more. You're meant for greater things. Um, until he disappears, Joshua. Joshua disappears without fully revealing who Chris was. And so that's what starts the book. It's not necessarily a origin story and where it takes him from when he was born. The origin is when he first hears the term arbiter of who he is. It's that very night where he first hears that he's called that, and that's what sets him off on this trajectory of, hey, I'm an arbiter. What does that mean? What does that look like? What am I supposed to do now that I know that information?
Like, put me in your brain for a second. What were you thinking, or maybe what inspired you to create these characters. Is there meaning deeper behind it, or were you just kind of like, oh, this is a cool story? Bye.
Yeah, well, a little bit of both, to be honest with you. I just like cool stories, but there is more of a meaning behind it, of course. The things that inspired me, there's a whole litany of them. Obviously, the Bible verse, that's what I'm most familiar with. I grew up in the church. I've read the Bible through plenty of times. It's what inspires me to do most things in life. But aside from that, I love classical literature. So I've just reread the Iliad not too long ago, and one of the things that really struck me with the Iliad, reading it through again this time, is just the two narratives that are like parallel to each other. You have the narrative of the gods, like obviously Zeus, Athena, and how they influence what's going on the world through Achilles, Agamemnon, and all that. And so there's two parallel storylines going on in this one epic poem. In a very similar way with Arbiter, there's also two narratives happening parallel to this story. You have what's going on with the higher dimension, the fifth dimension, and the fourth dimension. That affects what's going on in like this urban city called Caligo City. All the fractures are all metaphors or motifs rather of the world falling apart. Lives falling apart, and how do we put things back together? How do we heal these cracks? How do we go about doing that? And a lot of writers will have deep themes like that, but they don't come up with answers. This kind of leaves the ending ambiguous. Like you have to figure out yourself. And that's the point where Chris is at. Like he's seeing all of this. He's seeing the world fall apart. He's seeing literally reality breaking. He's not equipped to just fix things. He has to seek somebody who knows how to fix things, and that's where Joshua the mentor comes in. And this whole storyline is him seeking after this mentor, Joshua, to basically get the ability from him to go about healing, And so there's a lot of biblical parallels to that. Obviously, Joshua being the name of Christ, Jesus, and then Christian myrrh also. Myrrh, if you guys remember from the nativity scene, that's given to Jesus as a baby, and what that is the fragrance. In order to unlock the fragrance, you actually have to break it. You break myrrh, and then it releases the fragrance, and that's Chris's story. He finds himself to be broken, and through that brokenness, he has the power to, heal and be a healing fact in the world.
Wow, that's a really neat story. It's sort of the suffering healer or suffering Messiah, right?
Yeah.
That something has to be broken before it can come to life, like a seed dying in the ground.
And a lot of stories, fairy tales, a lot of them follow that same, because we live in a Judeo-Christian, even though it's fallen, right? But we still live in a Judeo-Christian society with a Judeo-Christian history and Greco-Roman, and they all follow this, death and rebirth pattern, where Christ is the fulfillment of that. He's the living that, right? That's why, it's amazing. But there's a whole mythology of that death and rebirth that, all points to Christ, and Christ fulfills. And so stories, especially in the Western side, really follow that pattern. And I'm kind of going into that old tradition of, following that pattern as well.
So bringing it down, to the sort of everyman's level with the youth today, do you think there's a renewed interest in stories that have kind of, a higher meaning, or I'll even say, with the idea of like the multiverse, there's sort of a seeking for something beyond the material world. Are you seeing that? Is that something you're trying to tap into?
Yeah, so humans are humans, right? We all have this desire of more, and where we look for that varies. I think that it's all accumulated in Christ. He is everything. But I do see today. I don't know if you're familiar with the new Superman movie or the Fantastic Four movie, but there was a time not too long ago where what was very popular are anti-heroes, which basically are bad guys that end up doing good things. Right? That was like the past 10, even maybe 20 years, it was the anti-hero that was the hero. And I thought that said something about society, that we don't know how to tell stories about good men anymore, particularly. But I do see that changing, especially with the new Superman movie, for example. That was widely successful, and it was about a good man to want to do good, and that really resonated with a lot of people, because I think for so long we forgot what that is. We forgot what that looks like, the good man. And we could go to classic virtues, right, and the Christian virtues, faith, hope, and love, and all throughout really history, right, all the way from let's say the knights, right? The medieval period we'll bring up, right? You had stories about King Arthur and the Round Table, and there were all these Christian virtues that they embodied, and they would go out and they would live these Christian virtues. That was the ideal man. That's what kids would read, and like, oh yeah, I want to be like that, And then you moving forward in time, it was the cowboy in America, let's say, for example. That was the new ideal man, where he was brave, he was adventurous, and he embodied a lot of these same virtues. So then we go to the superheroes, and again, as every kid, boys particularly, I want to be like that, Superman or whoever the new man was that society held up, and like, this is the person you want to be. That moved away to the anti-hero, right? That was the new standard of the bad guy that does the good thing, but he's still a bad guy. Now I think that's changing back. I do think, as I'm reading more novels and looking around movies and stuff, I do see that there's a trend towards transhumanism, which to perfect humanity goes to like the machine, a lot of AI, and it used to be like Terminator. You remember Terminator, where like machines were going to kill us? The sentiment is actually shifting to now that machines are going to perfect us. That's going to be the new man that we're going to aspire to, is the machine man, the transhuman. But God is God. There's always going to be a revival at some point where people are going to come to their senses. Jesus says He's the way, the truth, and the life, and the farther we get from that, the farther we get away from truth, the farther we get from life. The closer we get to that, the closer we get to truth. So as a society, if we come towards Christ, like every revival does, is a reawakening, then we're going to see more stories reflect truth, more stories reflect life, and it's not going to be death and nihilistic and hopeless. But I do see the new Superman movie and the Fantastic Four movie as reassuring that, I think there's going to be a craving for something good and true and beautiful, and I hope that Arbiter taps into that as well.
Speaking of the good man, I kind of, in a sweet way, would think that maybe you would be the good man to your daughter, because one of her questions was what inspired you to start doing this, but you had already answered that and said it was your daughter who kind of like inspired you to get started. Are you making this kind of like something you invite her into, and it's like a bonding time for you guys? Are you preparing her to reach out for her dreams, or?
We draw together. She draws nonstop. We have piles of her pictures just everywhere. Probably too much, but we draw together. We talk about stories together. My main thing with her is I don't want to push her into any one direction. She genuinely likes art, and so I try to encourage her to pursue that, and just teach her basic stuff just to make her even better in what she does, because she's a perfectionist and she gets very frustrated when things don't turn out exactly the way she wants. So just really helping her move through that, because every artist kind of goes through that too. And for me, when I was young, I didn't have someone there all the time to like work through that, so I would just throw it away, give up, and all stuff. So one of the things that I'm very conscious of is when she gets in that, just like, hey, take a break, we'll come back, we'll show you some more techniques that you could practice. So that's mainly the bonding that we have through the art. Now my story is a little bit more advanced. She's 7. It kind of like in the same way that Shakespeare and the Bible have like pretty bad things in them, even though it's a good story. In my comic book, there are some, it's the real world. I try to reflect the real world, really. So there's things that I don't really want to introduce her to, in my comic book. But some of my older stuff, we'll talk about some stories. And when we read bedtime stories, a lot of the stories that I read are stories that I actually, kids stories that I wrote, that I made up, and I've never published. But she tends to like me reading those opposed to Dr. Seuss or whatever else they have, so which is encouraging. I get to get feedback from a little kid about my stories.
Yeah, they tend to be honest, right?
Yeah.
Maybe a little too honest.
Right. Yeah.
You can hurt
Exactly.
your feelings till they're 7.
I like that other one, Dad. That one's boring.
Right. Yep. A lot of those.
So I'm just thinking, tell us a little bit about the internal struggle of whether to go for this passion project, I'm going to call it.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people Like you said, they started families, they're working full time, and they maybe had this thing that they were passionate about or even felt called by God to do, but it just seems overwhelming. Maybe it seems selfish, or I'm going to be taking time away from my family. Did you go through that struggle? Do you have any advice, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm still going through it right now. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So for me to back up to where I first decided to do this, these are stories that have really always been with me. Like Arbiter is new, but really the Arbiter story has been a story that in one way, shape, or form I've been wanting to write since I was a kid. Not that it was the way that you see it now, but it went through so many different changes and phases. But these stories, these characters, I really had the alpha version of them a decade ago, or more, 2, 3, and so they never really went away. The stories would kind of pop up, kind of like a zombie. You kind of bury them, but they kind of come out of the grave, in different ways. And so they were always with me, and it was the catalyst of it was that conversation, or that moment with my daughter, where she kind of reignited that flame to do that. But since then, the things that are important to me, obviously, I work 50 hours a week. My work schedule is kind of hectic. I do have a wife and 2 children, and I didn't want to take time away from them. This is not something I want to replace my time with my family. So what I ended up doing is really just late nights, kind of early mornings kind of thing, where if I'm going to work on my comic book, it's going to be after hours. The kids are in sleep, and there's obviously some compromise that we have to make, right? So Ben has soccer, right? So instead of me going to all the soccer matches, sometimes I'll have to skip out on one and do, so there are compromises that have to be made, and there is somewhat kind of a guilt there too, because I'm missing out on a soccer game. However, this thing that I have in my heart has to get out. It's been there for too long. This is a part of me, and I do feel like this is from God. I think all inspiration comes from God, and it's really what you do with it that matters. And so I've held on to this for a very long time, and it just got to the point where I can't anymore. I got to get it out. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, and it's kind of a day by day thing where I look at the schedule. I'm like, all right, where can I fit this in? With the busy life that we have, and so that's kind of where I'm at now with it. Where little by little, like the script is completely done. The art isn't finished yet. I'm still crowdfunding, which we maybe if we have time to talk about. But yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at right now. Is just kind of finding time in the weird hours of the day.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful part about family is when you can see that your loved one, it just lights them up, makes them happy. You just want that so much.
Yeah.
We'll make it work, or it's okay if I have to compromise. I see that a lot with my family, and it just creates, such a stronger relationship. I had a question, which you kind of answered, because working after hours is a great compromise on your end. But what about for our listeners who feel the same about, oh, maybe I've been putting this off too long. This was 30 years ago where I had this passion. Can I start it now? Maybe I don't feel like it's going to work, but it means a lot to me. How would you get them to just start somewhere?
Yeah, that's the hardest thing is actually starting. Like once you have a momentum, it's easier to maintain the momentum, but starting is the hardest part. And for me, I got to the point where it's an now or never kind of thing. Like I have to figure this out. This is my life. This is my schedule. These are the hours in the day. And even if you just start with like 15 minutes and just be consistent, 15 minutes of just like whether I'll talk about writing, but even art. Like I've been trying to start drawing again, which I haven't done in a while, like for serious. And just for like 15 minutes, I'll do sketching, just figures, just figure sketching, and then 15 minutes is done, and that's it. And then the next day. But it's really just starting small. If you have a story that you've been thinking about for a long time, just type it in paragraph. Type a paragraph, so try to summarize that story. Instead of having a blank sheet of paper, you have just title the story. And that alone will really actually help you write it, because staring at a blank piece of paper is very intimidating, But just writing the title of the story, or think about the title. If you don't even have a title, just think about what can I name. What is the point of the story that I want to tell, what I can name about it, and then write that down. That's really the best way to start, is just in the smallest piece possible, and then you just build on that.
That's really helpful for me. As a writer,
Yeah.
sometimes I have the title though, and then I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Like, that's a great title. Someone
Yeah.
should write that book.
Clear the title for a few months.
Right.
But let's switch gears. You mentioned the crowdfunding. Tell us about that, what you're doing, how that's going.
Yeah. So crowdfunding is first time I've ever tried to do this, and I've learned a lot by trying. So it's called fundmycomic.com/arbiter. That's the crowdfunding website that I'm trying to fund this on. And I think I probably made every single mistake you could probably make in doing the crowdfunding. So traditionally, what people do is they actually tell people, if you can imagine this, they tell people that they're going to be making something before they actually make it. So I did not do that. I made everything and threw it on there without telling anybody. So it's been a very slow process of me like, oh yeah, I should have told people that this is what I was doing. So there's usually like a 3-month period of where you kind of promote it. You say, hey, this is coming out. This is what I'm doing. Check it out. This is the story, all that kind of stuff. And then after 3 months, you would launch it, and then everybody would go and fund it, and it should fund within a few months, 2 to 3 months. So I did things the hard way. I put it up there, and now it's still funding. Now you can go look at it. It's I think 35% funded, but it's getting there. It's growing a little bit by a little bit, and yeah, it's basically just a way where you purchase the comic before it's finished. So that funding is helping me actually finish the product. That's the whole premise. It's not done yet. I need funding in order to make it finished and completed, and then ship it out so you can read it. So it's almost like a pre-order. It's just the product isn't finished yet.
Oh, okay. So if you give money towards it, you do get a copy of the
Oh,
novel.
100%. Yeah, that's at the finish line. So basically where I'm at right now with it is, like I said, the script's completely finished. I have 10 pages completely done. And so once I get more funding, I can put more towards the other pages that aren't done. And then finally, when it's all funded, it'll be printed and shipped out to whoever backed it. And there's different tiers of backing too. I have 3 different covers variants. It's the same story, but there's cover A, cover B, cover C. So you could just buy the one. You could buy a digital copy if that's all you want. You could buy a physical copy. There's posters. There's just all different things that you can check out on there as well.
That's awesome, and we will include all those links in our show notes for everybody.
Awesome.
So as we close, do you have a final question, Emma?
My last question is, how can our listeners support you? And I think that's a great way for them to support you, is to check out your work. I definitely will be checking out your work more, since I didn't get much time beforehand.
Thank you.
So as we close, do you have something you'd like to leave our listeners with, or any kind of, I don't know, challenge or theme from your story? Just a lot of people are on their way to work when they listen, or on their way home to work, and just need a little, inspiration.
Yeah, well, I know for me, when I look at my story, it's a constant reminder of how the world and all of us in the world, we're all broken. And we can't fix it. We can't fix ourselves, but we can seek Christ, really, and through Him, we can find healing. And sometimes we forget that. Sometimes as Christians, we think we're put together. Sometimes as Christians we think society is, look at that person, that person's really bad or whatever. But we all are. We're all on a journey to become more like Christ. We're not there yet. We're not like Christ. We need to become more like Him. So the closer we get to Him, the more healing that we'll find for ourselves, and the more people can bring on that journey, which is another side of the story. The more healing will spread across our society, our culture, our neighbors. So seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will come unto you. So that's kind of what I inspires me, and when I look at my story, it's what reminds me of what my mission is not to fix other people, not to fix the world, but to seek Christ, and allow Him to put things straight.
That's a great message.
That is a great message. I'm going to take that with me. Well, thank you, Vinny, so much for your time. And we wish all the best for Oblation Comics and the first novel, Arbiter. And like I said, we will have all our links so people can follow your journey and get a pre-ordered copy.
Thank you.
Very cool interview.
So cool.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.
Tell others about the podcast.
And for more information on today's guest, check out our show notes.
Until next time.